So, here we are. Tonight, webinar is about vulnerability in Naked and Unashamed. And I have a few ways I want to go with that. The first part that comes up for me is Adam and Eve and what happened in the garden. And before sin was introduced to the world, Adam and Eve fellowshiped with each other, and they were naked and unashamed. And that and as I think about what happened in the garden and looking at what's going on in a lot of the relationships and the relationships that are going on right now, the suffering in the relationships that's going on right now, those are some of the things that I want to touch on. The webinar is set to start at 7. I'm going to wait a few minutes before I jump in again, because I'm excited to get into the topic of how do you become vulnerable in the relationships with your child, your spouse, your friends, and even multiculturally. And I'll address one of the key things that get into our way of establishing solid relationships. And we'll also end with how do you get over it. Right, so I'm Arkela Covington. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. So by trade, I get to support individuals and families in key areas of their lives, their relationship with themselves, their relationship with others, and their relationship in their vocation, whether it's school, work, internship, and just how to deal with the day-to-day people interaction. And so to start off, I'm going to address the parent-child relationship. A lot of what I see going on with the clients that I get to work with and the population that I get to serve, parents have a very authoritative role. It's you do what I tell you to do, and that's it. And it doesn't leave room for the child to grow, right? So, the child, parent makes all decisions. Parent doesn't include child. Child starts to grow up. Child starts to make their own decisions. Child starts to make their own way. And the parent start to pull in and make other demands, unrealistic requests on the child. And right now I feel like I'm baffling because I have so much information that I want to share. So let's say I'm a parent and my child is growing up to engage in deviant behavior, whether it's stealing, hanging out with other kids that are stealing, getting high, skipping school. What are some things that I would want to say to my child? First thing I would say is, you can't hang out with them. Second thing I would probably say is, I'm taking your phone. You're not getting any money. You're not getting any allowances. I'm not buying you anything. And parents use buying stuff as a way to say, I don't like your behavior. And one of the things I do when I'm working with parents is I talk to them about why. Why don't you want your child to hang out with this particular person? Why don't you want your child to skip school? Why don't you want your child to use drugs? And I don't say that to be flippant. I'm saying that so we can get to the heart of the matter. If your child is engaging in behaviors that you don't approve of, it's usually because you're afraid of what will happen to them in the future. You are afraid of the consequences of their behavior right now. So if your child is skipping school, consequence is they may drop out. The consequence of them dropping out, they may live on the streets. The consequence of your child getting high at an early age would be they may use harder drugs in the future. And parents don't know how to say, sorry about that. So again, one of the things I ask them is, what is your goal in this relationship? What do you want out of your relationship with your child? Parents seem to think that they don't need to have a goal for their relationship with their child. A lot of parents feel that, hey, I'm the parent, I'm the one that's making the decisions, I'm the one that's telling them what they should do. Why do I need to set a goal on working with them? And what I tell them is the reason why you need to set a goal is because it'll help your relationship move further along. You'll have a smoother relationship with your child. It may not be perfect because your child is a living, breathing being, but if you continue to treat your child as if they are unable to make decisions, if they're incapable of um, following authorities, if they're incapable of making requests, if they're incapable of saying no, what you're doing is raising a child that's going to eventually rebel against you and rebel against authority. Because when children don't have the opportunity to learn how to make decisions, to learn how to be responsible, to learn how to be accountable, it's because they are not taught that. They're taught to be fearful. And fear is the very essence of what keeps individuals from being vulnerable in a relationship. So imagine someone, you solicited help for someone to help you build the relationship with your child, and they're asking you, okay, what is your goal for your relationship? Are you yet comfortable telling your child what are some of the things that scares you about them growing up? Parents don't want to admit that. And one of the things I truly, truly, truly encourage is talking to your child, letting them know that you're afraid, because what ends up happening is the child feels like you don't love them. And that's happened time and time again. And parents would say, well, I'm paying all the bills. I'm buying them everything they want. I'm taking them on trips. But love is more than about that. And if you read or listen to the 5 love languages from Gary Chapman, he talks about the 5 different ways that love is expressed. And gifts is just one of those ways. It's not the other ways. And you discount the other ways that your child wants to be loved. And they may have a gift set of time, quality time. That may be their love language. And if you're withholding that from them, they're not going to feel love from you. And this goes for your adult children also. Your adult children need to have that same type of relationship. And it's a transition. You can't go and say, hey, I don't, I'm your parent, and you can't go to your adult child trying to tell them how to parent their own children. Again, it comes back to fear, like your fear of not being a mother, of not being a parent, of feeling like your child is going to fail as a parent. So you feel like you have to step in. And so there's a lot more that goes on with being available to your child vulnerably, being your best self in front of your child. And when you're your best self with your child, you're not yelling at them and cursing at them for spilling milk on the floor. You're not yelling at them or cursing at them because they're not getting straight A's. You're not comparing them to your other children if you have more than one. And so when it comes to being vulnerable in relationships with your child, think about what most scares you about them growing up. What most scares you about them growing into a life of their own. And if you think that you've failed at some point, you have to have that conversation with yourself where you're being honest with yourself, and you're being naked with yourself, and you're saying, I wish I would have done this as a parent. And it's not too late. And as parents, children wait on you to come to them, and they will forgive you. All right. And so that's what I have to say about parent child relationship and the vulnerability that comes along with that. The next thing I want to go through is with romantic relationships. In romantic relationships, it's difficult to be vulnerable because you feel like you give so much of yourself to this person, or the person of your choice. And what happens is we start to take that for granted. we start to take for granted the fact that we have this person that loves us, and we start to think that they're mind readers. And when things happen in a relationship, whether we are interpreting that we're being rejected, that we're being abandoned, that we're being controlled, when we start to interpret the behavior of our spouse or our significant other or our romantic partner, when we start to take for granted that relationship, we start to have conflict in relationship. Think about this. In your relationship, when it was brand new, there was very little that you became offended by. And as you start to develop feelings for this person and you started to care more and more deeply about this person, you begin to become more sensitive to the things that they say and do. It's not because you think that they're a failure. It's not because you think that they're a loser. It's because you either have a fear that you're going to lose them or fear that they're trying to control you. Whatever the case may be for you in your particular situation, it is a fear, and it's a fear that keeps you from being vulnerable in that relationship. And the one time you can be completely vulnerable in a relationship is when you're 100% honest with yourself. Vulnerability does not happen if you're not honest with yourself. And when you're interacting with other individuals, you're always thinking, okay, what's my goal? What's my goal in this relationship? How do I want the end of this story to play out? What do I want this person to say about me? How do I want this person to feel when they leave me? But if you're always on edge and you're always afraid and you're never settled, you're always going to think that this person is trying to play you, leave you, and it causes friction in the relationship. And so the basis of the parent-child relationship, the romantic relationship, is fear. Fear is the prime ingredient to stopping us from living our best lives and experiencing the relationships the way that we most want to experience the relationships. It's a scary thing. It's a scary fact to say, I'm afraid that this person may not see me as I'm presenting myself to be. I'm afraid that this person may not see me the way that God wants me to be. And we become so afraid that it kind of makes us bitter toward the person. We start to concoct all of these different motives to their behavior, and it's just like we're throwing a monkey wrench in the entire relationship. And so, as you're looking at your romantic relationships and you're thinking, what do I want to get out of this relationship? How do I want to show up in this relationship? And then you're attacked by this wall of fear, and it stops everything. And one of the things that's not addressed is, no matter what type of relationship you have, whether it's married, whether it's single, whether it's cohabitating, you have created yourself a family. And when fear gets involved in that, it it's an attack on the family. And it's an attack on you standing in your best self. It's an attack on you living your best life. When you're fearful, you behave out of character. When you're fearful, you put up a defensive wall that will always get you in trouble. And so, in romantic relationships, in your relationships with your child, I'm not suggesting that you become completely naked and tell them everything that's going on with you and make them carry the burden of you being in this relationship. What I am saying is, if there have been walls that have been built, you as the person that's built the walls, have to reevaluate why you have these walls up in the first place. You have to reevaluate, do I need these walls, and or do I need it to be this high? And if you no longer need your wall to be that high, then you have to take the necessary steps to say, okay, I don't need this. I don't need to hide behind this. I could step over this and start to live into my best life. That's what being vulnerable is all about. Being vulnerable is you taking a good look at who you are, who you were created to be. And sometimes we don't know it. If you're not spending time with God, if you're not spending time in the Word, if you're not spending time with yourself, you won't know what your purpose is. You'll be unfocused and you'll always try and attach yourself to something to find meaning. Whether it's your relationship, whether it's your child, you're attaching yourself to these things so that you can find meaning. And you don't really need to do that. Spend time with yourself and spend time with God so that you can start to see who you were created to be. And you no longer have to hide behind fear and let fear interfere with your relationships, because that's what it does. And sometimes the embarrassment that comes along with knowing that you behaved out of fear prevents you from going to whomever that person was, or your spouse or your child, and saying, hey, I'm sorry. I behaved this way out of fear, and I wanted you to heal me. I wanted to make you, who is responsible for my reaction, to also be the person that covers my wound. And it can't be that way. You can't have it both ways. You can't go to the person that you're given responsibility and authority to take care of your feelings after they've hurt your feelings, because anything they say after that will only hurt you even more. So I'm going to go back to what I said earlier and say, when you are feeling fearful, unsure, when you feel like you're going to be rejected, when you don't feel like you're good enough, spend time with yourself and listen to the Lord. Whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, you will know what you need when you get there. And then in talking about vulnerability in platonic relationships, whether it's friendships, co-worker relationships, these relationships are important, and we look at them as if they're not. We look at people as if they're disposable. If they're not related to us, if we're not in an intimate relationship with them, they automatically become disposable to us. And we don't put forth effort in order to maintain those important relationships. We were created to be relational. And if you are gossiping and slandering and misusing individuals, it's because of fear. And I don't know if you were able to see the pattern yet, but fear plays a key role in all of the fear plays a key role in all of the conflict, the strife that goes along in relationships, because fear causes us to act out of character. Now, I'm sticking with fear because fear is what prevents us from being vulnerable. When you think about being vulnerable, most people think about being weak or cowardice, or somebody's going to get over on you. That's just a fancy way or a lot of words to say you were fearful. And that does not have to be the case. And so when you're looking at your relationships with people that you're not intimate with, or people that you didn't birth, and I'm talking about cousins, aunts, uncles as well, because they're in the platonic relationship, And sometimes we will give up on those relationships because there's so much hurt. And then when you start thinking, okay, what's my goal in this relationship? You have to think, okay, do I want to reconcile this relationship? Is this relationship worth saving? Is this person a person of quality? Is this person someone I should be looking at as if God looks at me? And the answer to the question is yes. Yes, that person is worth you being honest with, you being vulnerable with, and not treating them like they're disposable. And I'm going to go back to what I said before. Being vulnerable does not mean you expose all of yourself to everyone, because everyone cannot handle all of your stuff. But being vulnerable does mean you can be kind to them, even after you've been hurt. Even after hurt was caused by someone else, you are able to say, okay, this person is a child of God. This person is someone that's worth listening to. This person is someone that's worth me going out of my way to have reconciliation in this relationship. And reconciliation is something that we don't talk about much, but it's a biblical principle. When you go to someone, you apologize to them and you ask for forgiveness. Now, that person has a choice on whether they will receive your forgiveness or not. And if they do, you look to reconcile. And that doesn't mean that your relationship is going to be like it was. It means that this is a new beginning or a happy beginning. And so as you're looking at, okay, what's my relationship with my child, and what's my goal for that relationship? What's my relationship with my husband? What's my relationship with the people that I know? Am I willing to work it out with my sister? Am I willing to work it out with my brother? Or do I want to just harbor this anger and hold them hostage in my heart? Am I strong enough to let that go? That's a question that you have to answer for yourself. And the final one is being vulnerable in multiple relationships. Because this is going on with the world today. I see so many individuals profess faith in God, but still live a separative lives. They think that God sees color, ethnicity, what country you were born in, what state you were born in, what family you were born into, if you're wealthy, if you're poor. They tend to think that that's what qualifies you to be a Christ, and that's not what it said. And so when you're working with individuals from multicultural, and I'm not just talking about someone that has a different ethnicity than you, I'm talking about somebody that has a different upbringing than you. Same color, same neighborhood, different upbringing. That's a different culture. Someone that has a different world view or world perspective. That's a different culture. How do you look at them? Do you speak to them with envy or jealousy? Do you assign false motives to what they have just because you don't? Are you judging them because they're behaving in a manner that's different from your own? Think about that. Think about the vulnerability that you have to have when you are involved in a multicultural relationship. My personal opinion is that all relationships are multicultural and diverse. And I know that takes you outside of what multiculturalism means when we're looking at the macro of it. But no two people are born with the same experience. No two people have the same worldview. It may be similar, but when you're engaged in those relationships and you want to dominate it, or you want to talk down because you don't think this person is qualified, you don't think this person has what it takes, and then you're going to start to create friction in a relationship, think about it. What's your goal for that relationship? Are you being honest with yourself about why you're treating this person the way you're treating them? Are you being honest with yourself as to why you feel inferior when you're talking to this individual? What is it that you really want to happen. And as I'm talking to individuals or coaching them or providing therapy, that's one of the things I talk to them about. You know, what are you afraid of? And one question I ask a lot is, who do you need permission from to change? And I don't need permission from nobody to change. And it's so funny because they need permission from the person that they're holding hostage. They need permission from the person that they're refusing to forgive. They need permission from the person they're refusing to ask for forgiveness. They need permission from their children who are straying away because they don't want to be oppressed in the relationship. They need permission from all those individuals. And so that's the formal part of what I wanted to share with you. And I'm so excited about this, and I'm so encouraged by Lisa Hayes for the text messages and just the confirmation from what she's saying. And as I was just going through this and just thinking about what are some of the barriers that prevent people from having the type of relationships that they were born to have. And it came down to fear. And as I thought about it, I said, okay, what prevents individuals from having those type of relationships and having so much fear? And I was like, okay, people are afraid to be vulnerable in relationships. People are afraid to say that they were wrong. People are afraid to admit that they don't know it all. People are afraid to admit that their way isn't always the right way. And when you're afraid to do that, it makes it easier for you to tell somebody that they were wrong, for you to put somebody into their place, for you to try and control the other person because you feel out of control. And so as I was going through the lesson, as I was studying on the materials, I was thinking about some of my cases. One particular case came into mind. So I'm counseling a young daughter. She's Filipino and Black, and the grandmother is Filipino, the Philippines. And so she's not really connected to the daughter. So in this session, I have the grandmother and the daughter. And we're talking about the grandmother is saying to the granddaughter, you stay out too late. I don't want you riding the bus late. That's not your daddy. Like she's saying all of these things. And the granddaughter is like, why are you so strict? You don't care about me. You're just arguing with me. You just want to tell me what to do. You don't want me to spend time with my stepdad. You don't want to watch me, so my mom set it up for me to go sit on the bus while he's working his shift. And so as I'm listening to them, I hear that they care for each other. That's all I hear. And so I stopped them and I talked to the grandmother and I asked her, what is she most concerned about? The grandmother said, he's not her father, he's good to her mother, but men molest children. She's sitting on a bus late at night. I don't want people to get the wrong impression. I said, oh, wow. I said, have you told her this? Now, mind you, the granddaughter is sitting in the room. She's sitting right next to me. And so what I said to her was, have you told that to your granddaughter? And the grandmother was like, no. And so I coached her on what to say using some of the language I heard her say. I said, can you tell your granddaughter what you're afraid of? And so she turned to her granddaughter. She said the same thing she just said to me. I'm afraid that you'll be molested. I'm afraid that someone might snatch you. And I just want you to be safe. She's never said that to the granddaughter before, ever. And so the granddaughter starts crying. And I asked her, what did you hear? And the granddaughter said that she cares about me, right? So I went to the granddaughter and I talked to her about what I heard her say. And I said, and she was saying, I feel like she doesn't trust me. I feel like she doesn't want me around, but she doesn't want, she doesn't trust my mom to make good decisions. So I had her say that to her grandmother. And that was a groundbreaking conversation. Now, most of my therapy was with the mom and the granddaughter. I'm sorry, with the granddaughter and the grandma, because mom was a teacher. And so she was working night classes and day classes. So she was rarely there. And so whenever I do therapy, I always involve the family unit, because I don't believe in just doing therapy with children. I believe that therapy is it's a system thing. That's my philosophy. That's the approach that I take. And so I'm talking to the family, and I'm excited because the few sessions, when I seen them at my next session, it was an open conversation. It was open dialogue. And they had been doing work because I left homework. They had been doing work in the middle of the process. But just to see the vulnerability and how that transforms relationships, particularly that relationship, I was awe inspired. And it was just amazing to watch. We love the people that we love. And because we love them, we have a tendency to hurt them. And when we hurt them, it damages the relationship. And because God created a system to reconcile us to Him, to be in relationship with Him, we are able to use that model to be in relationship with each other. And that comes from having time with Him, having time with ourselves, and having time with the other person. And so that's what I wanted to share. If you have any questions that you want to type in, I'll gladly wait on it to come through. I know this is live stream and there's a bit of a delay. So anything you want to ask, I'll give you a minute to see if it catches up, and then I'll answer that question. So just while we're waiting, I'll just continue to just talk about the importance of recognizing what core fear that's coming up when you're engaging in relationships with individuals. And, I know what my core fears are. And every time I'm in a relationship with a new person, a new core comes up, or it comes up in a different way. I'm not going to say a new core fear comes up, because it's the same. It just manifests in a different way, depending on who I'm with and the nature of my relationship with this individual or that individual. And so it's been wonderful implementing some of these things in my own life, and it's not easy. It's a trial and error process, and I know that because everyone I work with is differently. I'm not talking about work for work. I'm talking about in my personal life. Everyone that I encounter, like everyone you encounter, the techniques that you're implementing as far as you determining what your goal is for the relationship, you determining how you want to be in relationship with this other person, it's going to show up differently. And it's supposed to. And because it's showing up differently, you cannot have the expectation that everyone will receive you the same way. And that comes to my final question. What are you doing this for? Because if you're deciding to make changes in how you show up to individuals, if you're deciding to make changes on how you're being present and walking through this world, it can't be dependent upon what someone else says or does. Because if it is, it's going to come across as phony, and the other person is going to recognize that it's phony. So any changes that you're making in your life, and I'll use my own self again for an example. When I make decisions to change a particular area of my life, I do think through how it's going to impact the people that I'm in most contact with. And in the past, I've let them know that I was making changes. Now, regardless of if they believed me or not, or if they were quick to encourage me or quick to say, right on, atta girl, you can go. I had to say I made this decision for me, separate from my cheer section, separate from my accountability partner. Because I've made this decision, I have to be accountable to myself. And that's what being vulnerable is all about. Being accountable to yourself. Not always going out. Holding on to the relationships. Finding your worth in your relationship as a parent. Finding your worth in your relationship with your spouse or significant other. Finding your worth in your relationship with your friends, your siblings, your colleagues. Finding your worth in your relationship with the multicultural population. If you're finding your worth in all of those, you're going to be so split and unfocused. You're never going to be able to have a moment to become vulnerable enough with yourself where you're not ashamed to express how you're feeling. Where you're not ashamed to express that you're going for your goals. Where you're not ashamed to express what you believe. That's what being vulnerable is all about. That's what being courageous is all about. That's what being strong is all about. It happens when you make the decision to say, in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve were naked and unashamed. Thank you for participating in this webinar. I am Arkila Covington, a life and family coach or marriage and family therapist. I work with and support individuals and families in their relationship with themselves, in their relationship with others, and in their relationship with their vocation, career, or school. If you have any questions, you can email me later or leave a comment, and I'll receive the notification. Thank you for participating, and have a great evening.